Hello and welcome to Indie Attack Today with Kelson, and
Woody.
today we are continuing on in our week of interactive fiction competition 2014 entries, and we have Hill 160, and this is by Mark Gerwat. Uh, this game is a text adventure that is set in World War One era France, and the main plot thrust is similar. I don't know if you've seen the movie Paths of Glory by Stanley Kubrick, Woody, but basically this sort of your squad taking on a impenetrable and important, German area, which
Yes,
yeah,
trench warfare.
right, and you go through the trenches to this important location that you're trying to take over, which happens to be a well fortified castle, and that's sort of the you're living in your squad and your platoon, and you're going to that inevitable goal battle. And yeah, it is very much a bare bones text based adventure game.
Yeah, this is on Inform, which is it's a text adventure development platform.
Right, it'll say
And
parchment loading is the loading thing.
yes. And I will make a full confession slash acknowledgement of biases here. Text adventures are hard to play.
Yes.
Um, I am kind of the age that I played a few of them on early PC, and I did enjoy them. I played a bunch of the early King's Quest games. I have played Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I like them, and they can be really funny, and they can have really good writing. They can be very interesting, but they can be hard to parse through. And I think Hill 160 is pretty easy to parse through compared to some of the other games that we have played and are not talking about on this week, because we have played stuff that we're not doing videos on.
Yeah, just because it was just, well, some of them that did not have walkthroughs, quite frankly.
Yeah, they can be a little hard to get
At
through.
the very least, a walkthrough is kind of an essential thing to someone, and likewise, I'm with you, Woody. I'm not super well versed in the show. I mean, in 2014, it's mostly people who grew up with them, and I think these are all, especially this game is like a major throwback. Like some of the other entries focus on sort of adapting to sort of the aesthetic to a modern sensibility, and I think this very much,
Yeah, your BioWare style choice wheel of
right.
options to do in a particular situation
Right.
instead of typing in literally what you want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a huge difference, and if you're playing it, and so I played this very much, um, most of the time looking for advice from the walkthrough because, yeah, there's just a lot to parse through, like you said, and you kind of need a frame of reference. In this game, at the very least, the frame of reference is very like you look through a lot of the functions. It's like you look through your backpack, you pull out stuff, you eat it, or you like clean your gun. It's stuff like that. It's like very like set in reality. It's not some like
Yes.
crazy like, oh, go find the egg that is magical. It's not some crazy thing. It's like, no, do this, do this, do this, and it makes sense.
Yes.
you know
And despite us talking about the difficulty of playing a text adventure game, this is a pretty straightforward, I think, text adventure game. And while they don't usually give you explicitly you can go to the trenches or you can go to no man's land, they really do a good job of setting up your options
that yeah.
for where you can go, because it'll mention an area and it'll say, to your west is blank, to the north is blank, and to the east is blank, and that's pretty much your
Yeah,
options.
and if there's any kind of food or what have you, it's going to very explicitly tell you that. It tells you all of the available items or what have you that you can interact with at any given time, which is definitely to the credit, and it seems very essential to the genre. But as we found, some games are not as informative, and so yeah, I have to say that while I do appreciate this game, I did have just it really made me think about choices that were made with this, and personally the big one, and I don't know where you want to go, but my first big thing is, why set a text adventure game in military combat? is my kind of first question, because that's a, uh, the
It's kind of the antithesis of what it's doing,
right.
Setting a text adventure game in World War One is kind of like having Infinity Ward develop like a house cleaning game or something.
Right. Yes. Yes. This is exactly my point. And again, all the props to this fella who made this game. But I I found that it was like, okay, what's the take gonna be on the genre? What in a text adventure game? What will you be able to achieve that you could not achieve in a first person shooter, right? Um, and that, potentially the pro here could be you could distinguish the genre in a different way, highlighting elements of warfare that are not commonly expressed in military games, and in writing. In prose literature, you can sink into the thoughts and feelings of different characters. You can slice up the narrative really easily. You can express abstract thoughts, probably most importantly, and like a literary tone and atmosphere can develop a sophisticated story. But I didn't really I didn't think that's really what they were going for ultimately, although in the description it
See,
talks about the horrors of trench warfare, but that was a very mixed bag. Sorry, what were you going to say there?
See, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of that. In that, I think it's an interesting idea to do a game that is like explicitly an action game as a text adventure because it is an interesting experiment. You can debate whether or not of like how well that turned out, but I don't necessarily think your medium for telling the story needs to limit the kind of story you're gonna tell.
Yeah, that's not what I was more saying. Like, those are all the pros as far as like what a text based adventure game in a military situation, what that could like offer up from the textness, of it to a genre that is a very saturated gaming genre, let's say, I guess is what I was saying. Not so much that you have to be limited necessarily, but it's like, what can that uniquely bring, I guess is what I'm saying. And I think ultimately, yeah, like you're saying, it's like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that this is set in World War One, because at the end of the day, what really matters is just like the writing and storytelling of any story, and it is,
And
yeah. Go ahead.
And yeah, I guess my final thought on this is that for a text adventure game, I think it is really, really good. I liked what I played of it. I didn't necessarily want to use the walkthrough, so, I got about 10 to 15 minutes into this and, had some parsing problems. And not problems in the sense of I couldn't figure out what to do, but, running into, like, my particular way of wording something is not the correct way of wording something. But, other than that, which I think is an inherent issue related to the genre of text adventure.
Yeah.
I actually think this was a really solid entry, and of the several other pure text adventures I played leading up to doing all of these videos, I think that this is probably the best one of those.
Yeah, no, and I agree. It does work well as a text adventure game. My only real qualm is just that tonally it was just a little mixed. That's my only thing, and I just want to quote for you real quick. Like at one point you have to go to the latrine. And it's like you eat bad food that's rationed to you, and then it's like you're going to the latrine and you smell it, and it describes in detail how terrible it is, and then you have to literally go through the mechanics of taking off your pants, shitting, and then putting your pants back on. Okay, and I was playing with the walkthrough, so I was just trying to, see what the game was about. And so I'm glad we both kind of did a different thing there. But this is the word for word description of this. And this is like right in the middle of the trenches. It says, this is a quote, "You take such a humongous shit in the latrine that it takes you over 2 minutes to finish. Man, that was some terribly awful beef. The most astounding thing about it was that there wasn't very much of it to begin with. How you managed to shit for that length of time is the mystery of the 20th century." All right. I mean, that's a fucking quote. And I'm saying, it just seems like there were some misguided attempts humanizing the characters of the story. In like wars, we often turn it into, you know, these big characters and figures, and look at the historical significance, you know, and the best fiction that deals with war often humanizes it. Our games, and even games, we just finished playing Spec Ops: The Line, which is an amazing military shooter, you know. But the scene with the bad food and the horrible latrine would work in a comic book or a movie, but when written in a way that sort of humorously talks about you taking a...
It would work in Metal Gear Solid 4.
Right, taking a dump, it just kind of feels like it sort of subverted its goal of humanizing by turning into comedy, you know? And so I just wanted to say that that my advice, just from just from the writing standpoint, maybe, you know, hone in on the tone, because it really threw me for a loop as I went further into the game. But other than that, I definitely applaud the effort, and think it's like totally admirable to take on a saturated genre like this in text, even if, you know, it doesn't seem like the immediate obvious choice. It did work really well and function well, and not trying to be overly critical. So anyway.
All right. Well, I don't necessarily agree with everything you're going forward with on this one.
That's okay.
But nonetheless, I think we both think this is a pretty solid game. So if you feel like taking a stab at a text adventure, this is something you could check out.
Definitely.